We swing over to Galilee, where if you went up to Peter's house or sons of Zebedee's house, you'd see a note on the door, "Gone fishing." Don't you just love it, man? Don't you just love it when you get this sentence that starts out like this: "I don't know anything about fishing, but," and then they rattle off. On they go. "I don't know nothing about fishing, but..." That's always an interesting time for me when I hear that. "I don't know anything about politics, but..." "I don't know anything about basketball, but..." Then you get this kind of diatribe about whatever it is this person clearly believes that he or she knows about. Well, I don't know anything about fishing. But it seems to me that Jesus, in this case, well, that stranger standing on the shore there, it seems to me that he might have been pushing his luck a little bit when he's hollering to these people in the boat, "Y'all having any luck?" All night long they've been fishing. Y'all having any luck out there, children? Y'all getting anything? And they say, "No, we're not." And then he says, "Oh, well, you need to find this. It's amusing. Fish on the other side of the boat. Throw your net on the other side of the boat." This boat, folks, was 8.2 meters long, 2.3 meters wide, 1.2 meters deep. So if you're over here fishing, and you're going to go to the other side of the boat, you're going to go 8 feet to your right. Oh, that's where the fish are. This is interesting to me. What's even more interesting to me is that these fishermen, who knew far more about fishing than I will ever know in my life, did it. They did it. They probably slapped their heads and said, Why didn't we think of that? Fish on the other side of the boat. That must have been it." But they did it. And lo and behold, they caught themselves a whole passel of fish. 153 fish. Filled the nets up, made it so hard they couldn't drag it in. 153 fish. And then the beloved disciple's in the boat, and he sees this person on the beach, probably somebody that looked a little bit like a gardener, and said, "That's the Lord." And Peter, who's been working without clothes in the boat, realizes, I need to, because I can't approach a, quote, superior, I can't approach someone who is my better like this. I have to be properly dressed. So he put his clothes on, and then he jumps in the water. Hope it wasn't too deep. Apparently it was about 100 yards from the shore. And then he's off to the races. Here's a quote from Albert Schweitzer. "He comes to us as one unknown, without a name, as of old by the lakeside. He came to those who knew him not. He speaks to us the same word, 'Follow thou me,' and sets us to the task which he has to fulfill for our time. He commands, and to those who obey him, whether they be wise or simple, he will reveal himself in the toils, the conflicts, the sufferings which they shall pass through in his fellowship. And as an ineffable mystery, they shall learn in their own experience who he is." Albert Schweitzer, in the quest for the historical Jesus. There's a lot of folks that when I'm doing my homework for sermons, there's a lot of folks that I talked with who claim that chapter 21 may be added on. It may have been added on to the Gospel of John. that it's an emendation or something that an editor put onto the end of it. Scholars point to the end of the language at the end of 20, the language that says, well, maybe you remember, it's right after Doubting Thomas' story. Jesus says, well, John says, now Jesus did many other signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not written in this book. But these things are written so that you may come to believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that through believing you may have life in His name. Scholars think that kind of is the end of the story. And they also believe, many scholars believe, that the first part of John's Gospel was added on too. So there's this whole thing going on. There's a great big old kerfuffle out there among theologians, historians, academia. And I kind of love to read about it because it's kind of fun to hear them spinning and yelling at each other in print in the nicest possible way. Some of this stuff is really interesting and some of it really is not. The person that I rely on most is Gail O'Day. Gail O'Day is the commentator who works and has written this whole story or this whole commentary on the Gospel of John in a book called The New Interpreter's Bible. This thing is what, 16 volumes or something long. She says, no, it's a part of John. It's a part of the gospel because there are no existing ancient manuscripts that didn't have it. You know, all of them are there. It's there in all of them. And this is the sense that I have, that it belongs. Let's look at it. It comes in two parts. This thing we read today comes in two parts. The fishing part with the huge catch and the breakfast. Breakfast of what? Loaves?
And fishes.
And fishes. Where have we heard that before? Anybody? Philip answered, 6 months' wages would not buy enough bread for each of them to get a little. One of the disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said to him, there's a little boy here. There's a little boy here. With what? 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. But what are they among so many people? There's a direct reference. There's a direct feed. There's a direct connection. Feeding the 5,000. And we think, scholars think that this is also a reference to the way communion took place in the early churches. That communion was made up of bread and fishes, etc., etc., etc. And what about that 153? What does that mean? Anybody have any idea? That 153 fish? That's a big number. They were big fish. 153. I don't know either. I think it just means a lot. I think that's what it means. A lot. There were a lot of fish. They were big. That's all I think it means. That story, that's one part of the story. Then we get this thing, we get this moment, this dialogue between Jesus and Peter. 3 times Jesus asked Peter if he loves him. 3 times. And what does Peter say? Well, yes, I do. Of course I do. Of course I do. And what does that remind you of? 3 times. 3 times Peter has asked the question. 3 times.
Because 3 times he denied him.
And 3 times he denied him. The woman said to Peter, you are not also one of the man's disciples, are you? Peter said, I am not. And now Simon Peter was standing warming himself. They said to him, oh, warming himself around maybe a brazier, just like this one is on the beach where these fish are being prepared. You are not also one of the disciples, are you? He denied it and said, I am not. One of the slaves of the high priest, a relative of the man whose ear Peter had cut off, asked, did I not see you in the garden with him? Again, Peter denied it, and at that moment, the cock crowed. There's some relevance here. These 3 denials from a man who vowed to Jesus that he would lay down his life for him. That's the end of part 2 of the story. It's all reflexive. It all goes back. It's all there. It's all there. This whole miracle thing, this whole story of John's whole gospel is about signs, pointing to Jesus, pointing to Jesus. This miracle of the catching of the fish points to Jesus. There is your story. Dig here, dig here, dig here. X marks the spots. X marks the spot. Dig here. And isn't it interesting how none of those people in the boat recognized Jesus? Is that not interesting? Nobody recognized Jesus. They saw him in the upper room and didn't recognize him. Mary at the tomb did not recognize him. Thomas didn't recognize him. Thomas is with his group. Who is this guy? How is it that they who should have recognized Jesus don't? Oh, wait a minute. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have come to believe. Blessed are those who have not seen and have come to believe. Okay, we believe. Okay, we believe. Now what? Now what? I'm a believer. What am I supposed to do now?
Go and feed my lambs.
Simon, do you love me? Feed my lambs. Father, do you love me? Tend my sheep. Marilyn, do you love me? Tend my lambs. This is where we dig. This is what it's all about. This is an expression of our belief. This is where we go from here. We've had this wonderful, wonderful message. Love each other as I have loved you. Well, how do we do that, God? How do we do that? Lori, tend my lambs. Rob, feed my sheep. Dig here. Dig here. Isn't it interesting that folks will sometimes start out by saying, I don't know all that much about fishing. And the next thing they start telling you is everything they know about fishing. Well, I don't know anything about fishing, but it seems to me that Jesus, who is in this case the stranger standing right there, well, he might have been telling us who have not seen how to do that fishing. Even as the Gospel of John reminds us that fishing is expensive, it's hard, and in some cases it's dangerous. He said this to indicate the kind of death Peter will experience, glorifying God. And in this season of resurrection, I may not all know all that much about believing, but well, there it is. He comes to us as one unknown, without a name, as of old by the lakeside. He came to those who knew him not. He speaks to us today the same word, follow me, and sets us to the tasks which he has to fulfill for our time. He commands, and to those who obey him, whether they be wise or simple, he will reveal himself in the toils, the conflicts, the sufferings which they shall pass through in his fellowship, and as an ineffable mystery, they shall learn in their own experience who he is. Who he is.